Hey viewers, this is Sky-Fi Audio from Glen Rock, New Jersey. Today we're bringing to you a restoration review of the Nakamichi 680ZX tape deck. This is an earlier machine, earlier than the Dragons and the CR7s that you're probably familiar with, but it's a wonderful machine. It's sort of a sleeper over the time. It has tons of great features and can do just about most of what CR7 can do in a more manual sense, but it's just as satisfying, nicely built, much easier to service than the Dragon would be or CR7, enriched with features. So I thought I'd do two parts today, kind of go over my setup here and how we restore and calibrate tape decks, and also then do a sort of feature review of the 680ZX. Just show you its basic operation, what we do to restore them, etc., etc. So I'm sitting here at my secondary workbench. This is not the one at Sky-Fi Audio. This one's at my home, where I tend to focus more on cassette decks. It allows me longer periods of undisturbed time or uninterrupted time. So I tend to focus on the more complex things like restoring cassette decks here. So I was going to show you the equipment layout and sort of what a purposefully built test bench looks like for cassette decks, which is mostly what I do here. So a typical workbench, we've got industrial quality, global industrial workbench, and it's fitted with a few shelves with just the primary things that we need. So first and foremost important is the sound technology tape recorder test system. This is a 1510A, wonderful machine, really old, 1970s vintage, but if you're going to be working on either reel-to-reels or cassette decks, there's really no substitute in my opinion. It's really been a great revealing machine of what's happening in a tape deck. Above it is tried and true Nakamichi T100 audio analyzer. I use that as a sort of backup and sort of a reference point as well. It's great for setting speed and measuring noise, etc., and doing some of the live adjustments that maybe the sound technology is not as good at. Basic oscilloscope 4-channel here, nothing fancy, just a standard Rigol DS1054 oscilloscope used to sort of visualize output and to measure things. I use this a lot with Nakamichi Dragons to measure the volt RMS at different test points, etc. Basic DVM up top, a multimeter, and then a frequency counter and generator just below it, here and here. That's Tektronix, very simple stuff. A power supply in case we need to bypass one of the internal tape machine power supplies. Basic tools here, soldering iron and some paste and cleaning stuff. Up top, my reference sort of workbench system looks like some Lin speakers, Nakamichi CD player, where I run a really cool stereophile test CD that I use to record onto tape decks. It just provides a really nice clean source of material for recording, and a very basic stereo receiver also from Nakamichi. And then my reference, fully calibrated, sort of optimal tape deck. That's an Nakamichi Dragon, which I often restore. This one's been restored to perfection, and I use it as sort of a reference point. I can create test tapes from it for speed alignment, for calibration, for Azimuth, etc. So I can actually just count on this machine to be accurate as a reference point. Then moving over, I've got a reel-to-reel here that's work in progress. It's a pretty neat Techniques R&B series. This is on our website if you want a closer look. This is a super rare reel-to-reel from Techniques. Even though it looks like an RS1700, it's really not. It's a 10A02. Then bits and pieces here, right? Some belts, some reference tapes, cleaning supplies. The headphones I use a lot for critical listening. When I'm doing a test recording, it's really the best way to hear what you're coming out with. So a lot of these machines, including this Nakamichi, have the ability to switch between the tape and the source. So if you want to do some super critical listening on comparing the recorded material versus the live material, there's nothing better than headphones, and really nothing better than Bose canceling headphones to make sure that you're not hearing anything that's maybe being generated by the equipment or around, or noisy family members. This is a real old set of Bose headphones that I have kicking around. And then work in progress, tons of tape decks here. I've got a couple CR7s. There's at least 3 or 4 Dragons in the mix in various states of repair. I've got 3 or 4 of my favorite machines, the Tandberg 3014A tape deck, also great machines to work on. And then some more Dragons up here that have been restored. Here's a neat piece, a Dragon wired remote control, super rare. We try to include them whenever we do a full-blown restoration on a Dragon. And then a really cool Nakamichi head demagnetizer that we use as a sort of a last bit on machines. And some more drives in progress. I see 2 Tandberg drives on the right. That's a Nakamichi Dragon right over there. And a really nice stash of Nakamichi parts. This is really an amazing find. I've got tons of belts here, capstan, pulleys, you name it, like a real plethora of gears, motors. Look at this, I got 3 or 4 of these reversing tape holders. Tons of gears, which are common failure in Dragons. And a bunch of capstans and take-up reels and you name it. So this is what allows us to actually do good restorations in Nakamichi. Really hard to do without a stash of parts. So when these run out, I'll probably retire from this particular piece of the business. So back to the 680ZX. This has undergone what I call a light restoration. It's not a full-blown restoration like we do in our Dragons or CR7s. And mostly because each machine kind of lets me know what it needs. This one was in good enough shape where it just needed a light restoration to get it to the point where it could go to a new home. And that's what I did. I sort of went in and replaced the idle wheel here, which tends to rot and get hard over time. There's some belts there. This is a belt-driven tape deck, so there are some drive belts that need to be replaced. There's another belt in here for the engagement of the entire mechanism. I think it's called a cam belt. There's a belt for the counter and pinch rollers, lubricating all the parts, and then full calibration using the sound technology, service manual, a lot of patience, and all the settings within here and internally to the machine. So this drive layout here is similar to a Dragon. Maybe I'll grab one so I can show you the differences. So it's the same basic layout, but the Dragon is obviously a lot more complex. The most common thing is it uses these dual plates here to hold all the moving hardware, just like this machine does. There's a center belt here for the idle wheel, just like the Dragon. And there's the Azimuth gearbox here with this neat belt that goes all the way to the head to adjust the azimuth. On the Dragon, that happens automatically. Here you see it as well with the mechanical belt going to the head unit. On the Dragon, it can happen manually, automatically, while on the 680ZX, it happens by hand, utilizing a series of adjustments here. The biggest difference is the drive itself. On a Dragon, it is a direct drive. There are 2 direct drive motors, one for each of the take-up reels, while on the ZLX series, you can see in there, right about there, you can kind of see the belt spinning. There's a belt that spins both drives. From an electronics point of view, it's a much simpler machine, doesn't have as much noise reduction and fancy features, but it's well built. There's no particular massive failure of capacitors on these as you would find in some of the other machines. They tend to be a little bit more reliable for some reason. And it's a much simpler design. You can get to every PC board without having to remove things, unlike a Dragon, which is a bit of a nightmare. All adjustments are available pretty easily. And it doesn't have the mess of wiring that you would find in the Dragon. So let me go over some of the features. Starting from the left, one of my favorite things about it is the eject button. It is a lever rather than a push button, which is kind of cool and super satisfying. But it's really, it's a more sensitive point. It's really where these decks tend to fail the most. Because it is a lever, it is likely to be overpressed. Compared to with a button you can really not overpress it, right? If you push really hard, you're gonna hit a stop and it's essentially gonna be fruitless to keep pushing on it. But with this lever, if you push really hard down, if I were to push even further, I could snap this eject lever, which is common failure. And that's what I did in this deck. I had to remove the entire faceplate and rebuild the eject lever by using a bunch of epoxy and hardeners and supports and pins. I'm pretty good at this point. I can restore these eject levers to better than new and super strong, and that's what I did here. The other neat thing about it is the lighting's super cool. It has a green light, sorry for all the glare, but it's got a green light inside of the tape well. It's got a green light at the tape counter, and then the fluorescent display, which is one of the neatest things about this deck. And I'll show it to you in working in a second. Go ahead, put a different tape in. All right, moving left to right, this is all the adjustments for calibration. This is not something you would do at home. This is something left to a technician, and it's got this really neat cover that you apply once it's all done. And that gives you access to all the heads, recording, playback, erase head, etc. Can be adjusted through here using some tools, maybe a couple of voltmeters, a manual, and a bunch of patients. So you can go through it here. Over here, this is pretty neat. It's got a pitch control. A lot of these decks no longer have that, but this is one of the last Nakamichis to have a pitch control to speed up the deck and slow it down, as well as tape speed. This is one of the few machines of modern that have a tape speed from 15/16 to 1 7/8, 1 7/8 being the modern speed for your commercial tapes. I imagine 15/16 would be used for maybe dictation or an event where you need longer record time than you would quality. So you'd be essentially exchanging record time for recording quality by slowing the machine down, just like you have on reel-to-reel machines. Super common to have 2-3 speeds built into these machines on these techniques. Let's see where that would be. Here it is. This Techniques, for example, has got a 15 7.5 and 3 3/4 speed. 3 3/4 would give you a bunch of hours out of a 10-inch reel, while the 15 speed would give you about an hour or so. I can't remember exactly. All right, the tape controls are pretty simple. They've got little LEDs to show their function just above them. So you can see here. Engaging record is done like on many decks where you hold the record and the play button. And the fast forward and the wind up's nice because you can go from one right to the other. As you can see, it'll stop it for you. So if I go from here, it's gonna automatically stop for me and then go in the opposite direction. Lets you find the sweet spot of a song pretty quickly. And same for play. You don't need to go to stop and play. You can go right from the rewind to the play. And play and pause, just to toggle between the two. And there it is, back to stop. Continuing on the knobs, we've got the output. This affects your overall output as well as your headphone output. Record level is coaxial volume control, or record level for left and right independently, so you can set your balance for recording using this knob. As you can see, it's there's two within one, with the left being in the middle and the right being in the back. The master record level, pretty self-explanatory. So you set your record volume. And then here, there's very common Nakamichi naming convention for tape types: EX, SX, and ZX, which equates to regular, chrome, oxide, and metallic. So you have to look at their manual to understand exactly what this translates to, but this is how you select your tape type. Below it is the EQ setting between 70 and 120. Most of the modern tapes use 70. Dolby NR and MPX can be engaged here for noise reduction. Try not to use it with a high quality tape to make sure that we get as wide frequency response as we can. This is a neat thing here, the display, calibration, peak hold, and VU. I'll show you the difference between peak hold and VU if I play the tape here. That's one of the neatest VU meters of any tape deck I've seen. The flickering that you see is just a camera aberration. You don't see that in real life, that flicker, especially in the top section. It's super steady. It's just an interaction between the camera frame rate and the rate of the display. But anyway, here you see it in action with it's setting the peak hold. So essentially those two little extra dots are holding in place at the highest point. And if I put it on VU meter, they essentially go live and they're jumping ahead. Calibration I'll show you in a little bit. I'll go back to that setting. A timer, this is if you want to record and play automatically. And this is the neat part of these high-end tape decks. Monitor tape or source. Here you can choose while you're recording whether you want to listen to the source material or what is being recorded. Super important in a high-quality deck. And then your power button. Now these buttons are unusual for Nakamichi. They're tiny little things that stick out. It looks like there's something missing, but there really isn't. They're pretty satisfying buttons. But what's nice about them is that you don't really hit them by mistake. It's got to be very intentional, but they are easier to operate than it looks. All right, and then this long row here is essentially for setting your bias on the tapes. Here you see that it is divided into speed groupings. This is the slow speed and this is the fast speed. And then it's broken down by left and right channels, and then EX, SX, and ZX, so the type of tape. So let me demonstrate. You essentially put in a blank tape. Here I have a Sony metal select tape with a 70 microsecond EQ, metal bias. So if I put this in there, set it to record. And if I put this on calibrate, it's going to essentially generate, so we can hear it, it generates a frequency tone. And it allows you to essentially use these potentiometers. You would pick, in this case, metal tape as ZX. You would essentially use these two screw adjustments, these pattern adjustments to get this to 0 dB deflection. So a real fast and easy calibration process. Although it's manual, it's still pretty good. And we're recording live right now. You see the tape is in fact receiving that tone. It's recording, it's playing back, and this is the output from the playback. So this lets you balance the channels and set them just precisely. So you do that prior to making a recording. You don't have to do it all the time. You might even do it if you flip the tape to the other side. But once it's done, you would stop the machine, rewind it, and then go back to just VU meter mode. And you can see that as you change the VU meter modes, the VU meter reorganizes itself. Right here you see 0 dBs sitting right over there. If I go to the speed calibration, it goes between 0, 1, 3, and 5. I'm sorry, not speed calibration, but azimuth and bias. Okay, so that's it for the machine, its normal functionality. Some of the calibration processes we use involve the sound technology machine. I thought I'd just give you a quick rundown of what that machine is like, what sort of things we can do with it. So I'm going to set this back to record. I've got the inputs and outputs from the back of the tape deck going into the inputs and outputs of the sound technology. And I've got it set for frequency response. Here is a chart of frequency response, and I'm going to run it so you can see what it entails. So when I push the start button, the machine will send a sweep frequency from 20K to about 20 Hertz to the machine. The machine will essentially record it, play it back, and then the sound technology will display it on its display. So here it is, it's running the left channel first. You can see right about here would be 20K. Right at the last bar would be 20 Hertz. So you'll see the machine essentially run through its course, and then it'll do the same thing for the right channel. It'll display it just below that. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's running through a frequency sweep. Pretty neat. So when it's done, I've actually set it to run one test. When it's done, I'll show you what it looks like. So again, this is the left channel, and that is the right channel, and that's your frequency response from 20 Hertz to 20 kilohertz. So now that it's complete, I can actually use the cursor to take a measurement at any given point. The dashed line is the measuring cursor. So if I wanted to take a reading, for example, at 1K, which is right about here, it gives me the dBs for the left and the right channel. So 12.2 and 13.0 if I compare the left and the right channels. So I can do that throughout the frequencies range and measure the response. And then over here I can move them within the graph. And here I can expand them and contract them. So this is about, let's see, so this would be 10 dBs of spacing horizontally. And if I wanted to really zoom in and max it out, there's 2 dBs. And then this last setting here is essentially superimposing the left channels and the right channels. So pretty flat frequency response. I'm fairly pleased with this machine. If it wasn't properly calibrated, we'd see something completely different. You might see a hump here at the high frequencies, or maybe the bass would be dropping off. But fairly good performance for a DAC of this age. Other things we're able to set here is the Azimuth. That's a pretty cool test as well, where these guys represent the Azimuth phase error within the channels. We can do second and third order distortions. Channel separation, you can set the speed using this machine, and also measure the noise and the flutter. So pretty sophisticated for its age. You should see inside it's absolute madness. There's a million computer chips in what would take 50 integrated circuits back then. You could do in one today. But still very reliable and a great machine. So that's it. Put the tape back, put the music on. This is just a common tape that I use for playback. But here it is, the Nakamichi 680ZX. Thanks for watching. I'm sorry if I rambled on in this lengthy video. But it's a good overview for not just this machine, but our process that we go through. And it'll vary from machine to machine. This, again, got a light restoration on some Nakamichi Dragons, where we take the entire drive apart and service almost every part in it. It's much more involved. Usually on Dragons, we'll recap a lot of those little orange suicide caps that it has, and we'll do a much more involved calibration process than we would on maybe a 680ZX. But here it is, the Nakamichi 680ZX Sky-Fi audio. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you like this video or you want to see our future works. It helps keep us motivated and take the time to make these videos for your enjoyment. And visit us online at skyfiaudio.com. We have thousands of cool vintage, unique artifacts for anywhere from 60s to current today. At skyfiaudio.com. Thank you so much.